Thank you all for being here. We have John Loftman, we have Holly Morris, Dr. Kelly Trahan, Ed Rabinowitz, going in order on my screen. They've joined us because they have experience using the Kandao in the classroom. And we're here today to kind of talk about some of the best practices, some of the things that they've seen, some of the things that they've experienced, and that way we can share them with you as we're going through. So hi, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And, if it's okay with you, we'll get started with our first question. What are the challenges you've experienced in this type of teaching modality, and how did you address those challenges? So when you're in your classroom, what are some of the things that you've seen or that you've done?
One of the things that is really noticeable, if you're doing something that is totally face-to-face or totally remote, you have different ways that you approach this. Well, now you're doing both of those things together. And so you have to figure out what can you do that engages the students that are face-to-face, but more so engages the people that are remote at the same time. And so you have to really sit down and think about what are some things that I can do. And even then, they're not going to work entirely. So when you say best practices, I would amend that to best practices so far. I mean, what we figured out so far. So engaging the students. One of the things that I do in a face-to-face class is I frequently have students do. I'll call them vocab, but it's actually just important terms for some new topic that we're getting into, and I give them 3x5 cards with words on them and have them work in small groups and try to figure out how to arrange these cards. What are ways in which these terms fit together, and how do they fit with other terms that they have? Well, so now I wanted to do this with the students who are remote. So I sent them a file. I don't know, you can kind of see here. I put the terms into a table ahead of time, told them they had to print these out ahead of time and cut them into little cards so that they had them ready to go when class began. And then the students who are face-to-face are in small groups, and I put the students who were remote into breakout rooms so that there were like three or four people together, and had them do the same thing. It worked reasonably well, but I did have to come up with this idea of sending the file ahead of time and having them do something ahead of time. So it's it's just those kinds of things that you have to anticipate.
I think Holly hit the nail on the head when she said about doing things ahead of time. I found, and this was actually Brian's suggestion last semester, for a fully remote class, I found instituting a discussion board and getting students to think about and actually post comments and insights and evaluations on the upcoming topic and chapters we were going to be discussing in advance. So then we get into the class, and they've already thought about it. They've already written it. They've already run it through their minds. And I can easily, and I'm going to do this again in the fall, even though it's going to be split face to face and remote. I can then say, hey, John, you posted something about such and such. That was really interesting. Please share that with the class. Well, they're familiar with it. They can even just go into their post and just read it to the class. But like Holly said, doing it in advance, getting them to think about the subject matter before class starts, I found to be incredibly beneficial, rather than hitting them with something. I mean, we've all been there, right? Sitting in the classroom, you throw out a question and you get blank faces. Well, it's even worse in the remote situation. But if they've thought about it, written about it, posted it in advance, they're much more relaxed and comfortable in discussing it.
John, I know you've used this camera quite a bit, or at least a camera like this quite a bit. What about you? Have you seen anything that's been, I guess, a challenge for
Oh
you?
my God, yes.
What was that?
Um, I've been using it for microbiology lab,
Okay.
and the largest challenge, the hurdle that I've found is that when I have a mixed classroom of say 6 people in face to face and 10 people remote, I find myself drifting and paying attention to the people that are face to face and watching their lab skills. And I found myself, I wouldn't say, well, I guess I would say, giving short shrift to the people that are remote and not participating. And it was amplified during summer session when the labs are 4 hours long. In the spring, when it was, an hour and 20 minutes, I could keep everything pretty well scripted. And even though I had people in the class, everything moved at a certain pace. With the longer summer session, there's actually more hands-on work that can be done. And I found that I was kind of leaving explanations that I would normally provide the whole class, leaving that behind for the people at home because people were just tuning out. And what I did for summer is I stopped the face-to-face option for students so that I could be sure that I addressed everyone equally. Because it was a remote class to begin with. So what I did is I opened it up. If anybody wants to come in, I can let 9 people into the lab. And that's how I addressed it for the first session. But I did notice that once I would give someone the demo and the explanation, the people at home did appreciate seeing the other students be active and do the task. But there's time involved in doing the task correctly and doing a whole exercise, not just a demonstration. And that might have been something that I need to look at to change next summer. But it didn't work for me during the summer session. In the spring, it worked pretty well. I would have 3 or 4 people, have people at home, and the labs do work pretty well because the micro labs are only an hour and 20 minutes, but they meet twice a week. But
So,
that's
John,
what I came up with.
So one of the reasons I ask, and maybe this is just my curiosity, maybe there are other people out there who are going to have this experience. So I'm standing here, I'm in LB5, the camera is, I don't know, 3 feet in front of me, and you can still see all of this room around me. There's a lot of room. For a course like yours, a bio lab, where you're looking at something really up close and you're demonstrating something really up close, was the fact that you can't zoom in, zoom out with the camera, at least not easily, was that a challenge that you had to deal with? Did you move the camera? Did you just ignore that?
Well, what I would do is I would either use the camera on the desktop if I needed to. That single camera, I would switch to that one if I wanted something right on top of me, or I would just do the mode on the Kandao to a single screen or single speaker, and then that would and then I would orient it beforehand, which is part of the prep of the room. Where can I stand, and what's the field of vision that people have, so that they can see my hands and they can see what's the bench top and they can see what I'm doing. I've also brought in, like if I want them to see the Bunsen burner flame, I have a big black background that I can pull out and put behind the flame so that they can actually see it, as opposed to looking through it at my white lab coat, which it doesn't, nearly show up as well. So I just had to learn what the camera capabilities were, and you really have to plan out ahead where you want to stand when you do certain things and what people can see. And also, I guess when I would walk around the room, what the lag time is.
And by
because
lag
it doesn't
time,
automatically follow you.
So by lag time, you mean how long it takes the camera to find you once you move and
Right. And the
talking.
camera, and really, if you just lighten up with it, I mean, I'll be talking and I'll take a breath, and the camera on single screen will move, maybe a fan turns on or a vent or something and goes to the corner of the room where no one is. Then you just keep talking and eventually it finds you again.
Sure.
And then you say, oh, here I am. I'm
So
back.
as you can see, I'm in LB5 and I have nobody here with me. So what I'm hearing you guys all talk about is getting ready before class, knowing some of the things you're going to have to deal with and prepping ahead of time, sort of the way I did here, where, I didn't have to do much. I just had to figure out where I was going to stand so I could see you guys up on the big screen up in front of me, and the camera could get me as well. So, you guys have a little bit more prep than I do, but just to give some context, that's what I had to prep. That, and I had to figure out the Google Slides stuff.
Well, I think that was a good point of, that Ed and Holly brought up about what form your presentation is in, PowerPoint versus the Google Slides. That if you know what works, make sure you're prepared with things in that format.
All right. Our second question, and a couple of you kind of touched on this as you were talking. How do you ensure your remote learners are part of the classroom experience, or are getting the best out of the classroom that they can?
I have something that I do with the remote students before class begins. And so whether I'm doing the entire class remote or whether it's remote and with Kandao, put the students, if they arrive at class early, and I actually encourage them to come a few minutes early, put them into a breakout room so they can talk to each other just like they would if they were coming into the classroom and they're sitting there talking to each other. Now, the students who get there right on time obviously don't get to do that, but that gave them a little bit of an opportunity to at least get to know somebody else casually before class began.
I like that idea.
And then as people would show up in the class, I would just say, "Okay, I'm putting you into the breakout room." So it was everyone went into one breakout room. And I think they like that.
I think Holly touched on a good point about, because I saw this all too often with the fully remote class, was students showing up. If the class was starting at 2:20, they showed up at 2:19 or 2:21, 2:22. The mindset being, well, I'm at home, I can dial in anytime I want. And I think Holly raises a good point about encouraging them to get there early, because I'm there. The instructors are there, and students are sitting in the classroom, and there's banter between the students or banter between me and the students, and it's whether you're putting them in breakout rooms and doing something formally or informally, there's just something that builds relationship wise, and the more you can encourage them to get there 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes ahead of the start of the class, I think all the better to have them feel part of it, as opposed to, because I'm not patting myself on the back, but I start at 2:20 or I started at 11:05, whatever it is, I'm starting at that point. If you come in 2 minutes later, you've missed it. And so I think that's a really good point about encouraging them to log in to the Zoom earlier rather than just right on schedule.
Now, John, you mentioned earlier about some self-awareness where you became aware that you were paying more attention to the one group as opposed to the other. How is it that you were able to I don't want to say fix that, but how were you able to address that, at least in the way you addressed your course?
I've in order to address maybe not interacting as much with the remote people, I just had to consciously follow a plan of what I wanted to cover and not get off track with the people that were face to face with doing lab skills. Also, if people aren't, if I'm not hearing anything from the remote group, I consciously started asking questions to people in the group.
To individual, you would call out that person and say,
Sure.
"Hey, John,
What do you think about this? Or have you ever tried that? Also, in the lab, to try to build their lab skills remotely, I have them do a number of videos where they use props from their house and simulate the actual things that we're doing in lab. So frequently I'll ask people, well, what are you going to use as a Bunsen burner? Or what are you going to use as an inoculating loop or a Petri dish or whatever it might be? And I'll put them in breakout rooms again, and they can talk about things like that they're using at their house. Because I think, and I agree that, one of the strengths of the education is that people meeting each other, not just the content. And people tend not to talk in a remote setting, or the people I have don't interact very much when everybody's in the room. But if you put them in with maybe 3 or 4 people, more cameras come on, and they tend to be smiling when they come back, which I think is a good sign.
So you kind of alluded to my next question a little bit, but you have these students who are remote, they're not in the room with you, you're demonstrating, so you may not be necessarily paying very close attention to the screen. So how do you make sure that you're looking at them? If they have a question, they have their hand up. If they are trying to get your attention, what are some of the things that you've done or that you think you might do? Or have you not experienced that?
Usually I just have them bark out whatever they, if they have a question. Well, the one thing is I usually use a headset. And on one hand, I've had people that don't hear well who say that the remote classes are great when the instructor has a headset. They can hear better. And I don't hear very
like the one you're wearing, or
right. And this thing is maybe 10 years old. I mean, it's no cutting edge anything. But I don't hear very well. So when the classes start, right at the beginning, I tell the students, I don't hear very well. So it's not going to insult me if you bark out a question or are loud, because that might be how I hear you. So I encourage them to speak up, telling them that I'm probably not going to hear them if they're quiet. And usually they'll do. And this comes into another question that you had addressed, is knowing what speakers to use in the room. If you use the speakers on the Kandao, they tend, on the ones that I use, to be much weaker than the system speakers that are part of the smartboard system.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and one that I was going to ask about in a little bit. But while we're there, you're in a room, and I think Holly, if I remember right, you're in a room with a smartboard in the front, right? And I was
in the spring, right?
Right. And if I remember right, over in 207, you have a projector with a screen, if I remember. But when I was in there recently, the other day, that microphone or that speaker and that projector or in that system were pretty good. So it might be one of those things, and correct me if I'm wrong, where you're going in and you're kind of looking at what your options are and picking the best of those options. It doesn't mean you have to have the Kandao as your speaker. That's just one of the 3 or 4 options that you might have. Is anybody else using something else other than the Kandao for their speaker?
I was using the smartboard speaker, and one of your later questions. So I guess we're kind of getting to that now. Is did you have trouble hearing? I had trouble hearing the students who were remote. They did not have trouble hearing me. And in fact, I relied, and so I like John, I have a little bit of a hearing problem, and I would actually rely on the students who are in the class to help me hear what the students were saying. And I also, like John, just tell students, if you have a question, write it into the chat, and then somebody tell me that there's a question in the chat. Whether it's a student in the face-to-face class who can see it up on the screen, or one of the students who are remote. So I just rely on all the students. If somebody has a question, tell me that somebody has a question.
All right, so our third question, have you tried group work in your class? And I know a few of you have said you've used breakout rooms before, but how did that go? And were there any challenges with that?
The answer to, are there challenges with that? Absolutely.
And to be fair, that's probably true whether it's remote, using the Kandao, or if it's in person, I would assume.
Although, I mean, group work in person, I think that we're so used to doing that it's pretty straightforward. You've got students in 2s, 3s, 4s, whatever it happens to be. You have them move around the room. You have these two people get together with those two people. It works really well. And so it still works really well with the people who are face to face. And now you're trying to do the same kind of thing with the people who are remote. And I've tried a couple different things where I put them into individual breakout rooms. The problem with that is unless I go into a breakout room, I don't know whether they have questions or what the discussion is, or that they're discussing the wrong thing, which has happened also, as it turns out. So one time I just told the group that were remote, you all just talk to each other. I mean, just pretend this is a big classroom where everyone's talking. You guys talk to each other remote, from home, and the people who are in the face-to-face room are just going to talk to each other, and we'll just ignore the background rumble. And I thought, maybe that would work. Well, the people who were remote were still hesitant to talk to each other. But I think if I tried that a few more times, that they would get used to it. And so, you guys talk, we'll ignore you. These guys talk, they'll ignore you. And you try to get things to work that way. But yeah, putting them into breakout rooms does work better than trying, at the moment, than trying to have them work as a remote group and a face-to-face group.
Yeah, the thing that I found with the breakout rooms, which I thought went well, and the students gave me feedback that they enjoyed them. But I think somebody mentioned this at the last session that we had, which is really important, is when you're putting them in breakout rooms. So number one, I tell them, don't hesitate to call me in, because there's that mechanism to do that, to call the instructor in. I do go in periodically if I don't hear from them. But again, what somebody mentioned last time was making sure that we give them as specific instruction as possible in terms of what exactly they're supposed to do when they go into the breakout room. And then to let them know that I'm not just giving them 20 minutes of free time. When I call them back, I make certain that whether it's a group that's been face-to-face or in the breakout room, I have them report out. So they get used to the fact that everyone's going to be accountable, and we better talk about something because he's going to call on us and we don't want to stand there and have nothing to say. So again, it comes back to, I guess, that whole planning in advance of what you're going to do. But I found that, again, as somebody pointed out last time, if we give them a very specific direction, I welcome them calling me in. I go in periodically, and then having them know they're going to have to report out, I think helps a good deal.
I'll absolutely agree with that. That making sure that they know what it is that they need to do, and are clear on what the expectations are, is really important.
So, question number 4, are you guys using Canvas, and how has that helped you and your students?
Yes. And any handouts that I'll put handouts into Canvas. I mean, I do everything through Canvas, so I I don't know why you wouldn't.
All right, our next question, and this actually comes out of a conversation we had with Holly earlier. How do you provide notes to your students when you're using the Kandao in your room? What works, what hasn't worked, and what are your experiences with that? Holly, why don't we go to you, because like I said, this was based on a conversation you and I had way back about what was working for you.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so like that table that I showed at the very beginning, I put that into Pages and instructed the students to download that. I'll put PowerPoints into Pages, and then put these things into modules so that the students know where to find them. And that way they can look at the PowerPoints ahead of time, or they can pull them up on another screen if they want, rather than what I'm showing in class. So basically, I just provide anything that I think is going to be useful. I also had some problems. Problems that you work on, not problems that you have to, not the other kind of problems.
So like sample
worksheets, yes, that I would post ahead of time so that the students could, so with that, when we're going over them in class, they have a piece of paper in front of them as well as what's on the screen. So yeah, basically I just put things into Canvas and into some module so that they can access things beforehand or in class or after.
John, what about you? Have you ever had a situation where you've been in the middle of a demonstration and you're trying to write like the procedures down for what you need to do, and how do you share those with students, especially in the remote sections?
What I would do is, well, I agree. One thing is I do agree with Holly. I put things into Canvas. And as I access, whether it's a PowerPoint or a page or a file, I have it loaded so I can just go to it in Zoom and share my screen. But what I also do is I walk through the canvas of where it is and how to find it. I find that no matter how many times I do it, if I just pull something up and say it's in the module, someone will ask me what module it's in. Even though everybody knows or should know what module we're in, someone always asks which one I'm in. So I just repeatedly go through, this is the home page, this is the module, this is the one we're working on today. And in this module, these three things are the three things that we're going to be looking at. And here's the one, here's the second, and here's the third. And I'll probably do that at least twice. Not spend a lot of time on it, but just walk through it. And then there'll still be, where's the worksheets, which was right under the syllabus module. So we'll flip up there for a minute. But I think the power of the Canvas that I see in it is that it's in that one place. I have everything. I have all the course content, have all the examples, have all the templates, the assessments, the grade book, everything is there. They can link out to the publishers' pages from the Canvas webpage. So I think the one thing is just keep it consistent. Make sure that the modules make sense, what's in them, and continually go back and say, this is the module we're working on, and this is how you open it up. And these are the things in the module that you need to complete by next Tuesday. And I do that even though on the assignments page, or whatever you call it, in Canvas, it has all the assignments and when they're all due. But for a number of people, there still needs to be a connection between what those assignments are and where they are.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
So one of the things that I think it was last Wednesday or Thursday, I was over in TC 207, which is actually the room where I was working with Ed. Well, what was that, back in April, I guess, to do the camera over there. And in that room, it's a very long room, but it's not very deep. And over on the, if you're facing the students, over on the left-hand side, you have a screen and a projector, and behind you is a whiteboard. Now, I know that we had talked before about, writing notes on the whiteboard, and that was hard to pick up. And if you actually look at Kelly's screen right now, you can't see what's on her whiteboard very well. And I would guess that's probably about 10 feet behind you, give or take. So I went into this thing last week with the expectation that stuff on the whiteboard wasn't going to show up, at least not well. Students wouldn't be able to see it. And what we found out was, in fact, they could see it, but you had to play with the settings on the camera by changing the mode to the one that we're actually in, where I'm actually in, where it's just the one presenter speaker mode, where it's just one visual, and then having the students pin that in Zoom to be the main video image that they see. Then they were able to see the stuff on the board quite well. Now that's in that room. That camera is maybe 10 feet away from the board, give or take. I can't promise that's going to happen and be the case in every room. But the good part about these cameras is they're mobile. So if you want to write on the whiteboard, apparently it does work. All the people in the remote part of that course or of that training were able to read what I wrote on the board. If you're in another room and that's something you want to do, try moving the camera around a little bit too. So
the other thing then, and now I remember what we were talking about previously, as far as writing notes in the classroom, the smart notebook. So doing things in smart notebook and having that show up on the smart board worked really well. Whereas when I was using a Cuomo board. When I tried using the Cuomo board mechanism, it didn't show up for the students remotely. But Smart Notebook, because that was going through the computer, I assume that's the reason. It was because it was going through the computer and then onto the smart board. That worked.
That was my assumption too. So. Yeah. But yeah, like I said, I was pleasantly surprised that the people that were remote were able to see what I wrote on the board. So, but you're right, using something like Smart Notebook, using something like, what's that program on Windows 10, the Microsoft Ink or whatever it's called, that might be an option. PowerPoint, I think, John, I think you mentioned PowerPoint and using that. That's a really good option. So I think it's just a matter of finding what's good for you, what's comfortable for you, what's comfortable for all your students. Am I off base on that?
No, there's even a whiteboard option when you share your screen on Zoom.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Where you can draw or you can just type things in.
Yes. Although the advantage to doing something like Smart Notebook that's showing up on the smart board is the students both remotely and in the classroom can see equally what it is that you're writing.
Also, if you're recording it, now it's in the recording as well. So.
Yeah, and speaking of recording, I highly recommend recording classes. Not so much so that the students can go back and watch, or students who miss class can watch it. I mean, that's an option too. But you can go back and see, like, oh, okay, that worked, that didn't work. So going back and looking at what you did in class it gives you feedback as to what's working for you and what's not working. What do you need to change next time?
Sure, absolutely. Great, thank you. So let's move on to question number 6. Has audio been an issue for you? What are some of your takeaways from the audio from the Kandao?
I use the audio.
Ed, let's start with you. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Holly. I used the audio from the Kandao in TC207, and it worked fine for me in terms of me being able to hear the students, them hearing me, and them hearing each other, whether it was students speaking remotely or students speaking in the classroom. The volume control on the camera was quite sufficient. And maybe it's just the classroom, because I've taught in 207 a lot, and I found that the system there is not very loud. You can't bump up the volume too much. So in that case, I was glad to have the option of the Kandao, which again, in that room and that camera, it worked really, really well.
Has anybody ever used an external speaker? I know we have those hockey puck speakers or the computer speakers, anything like that. Have either of you guys used something like that? Holly, John?
I haven't, but that might be useful. The students said they could hear me. I was the one having the problem hearing them.
Right. Oh. Right. The policy for students having their camera on, and I think Holly, you mentioned this earlier about getting students to turn their camera on. Do you have a policy for your class? And if you do, how do you guys enforce it? John, what about you? Do you guys have a policy in your class? Do students have to have their camera on?
I encourage it, but I don't mandate it.
Now, is that a department thing?
Pardon me?
Is that a department thing? This is where I'm not sure about. Maybe Kelly.
No, we don't have a department issue, and of course I'd like everyone to have it on, and we do have a couple people in our division who mandate that everyone has to have their camera on. But I've also seen some studies where people who don't have their camera on might not have the camera on because of their living conditions, where they live, how they live or whatever. And it might be a burden on those students if you demand that their camera be on. So it's something that I haven't solved. It's frustrating. Some classes I'll have 2/3 or more of the people have their camera on, and it's great. I had a class last Wednesday, which I'm going to have this afternoon, which I'm going to have to address, where no one turned it on. So I'm torn between turning mine off and having the class that way, and see how, if anyone says anything, if they even notice that I don't put my camera on, to the point of just talking about it. So I don't know how I'm going to address that yet, but I've done training before, nationally in places where they don't have the cameras, and it's just terrible when you talk to yourself for hours.
What about you, Ed? Have you thought about that? Have you solved that, as John said?
Well, and especially in communication classes, I tell students that, and I haven't mandated anything, but I've told them that a big part of communication is nonverbal communication. And if I can't see them, I don't know if they're questioning something, if certain messages are not getting through, if they're participating. And sort of like John said, I've thrown it out at them. I said, how would you guys like it if for the next 80 minutes I turned off my camera and you just looked at a blank screen? So I've tossed it out to them that way. In classes like presentations class, I do tell them that, again, I don't mandate, but I do tell them that if I can't see you when you're presenting, that's going to negatively affect your grade. There's just no two ways about it. I have to be able to see you and see what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to take a hit. But other than that, yeah, I have strongly encouraged. I will tell you that because I also teach a class periodically at Penn State's Lehigh Valley campus. And they told all the instructors, you cannot mandate cameras on, but you can make it a part of class participation grades if they're not engaged because the camera is not on. And so that's basically the approach I take with students is if I can't see you and I don't know that you're engaged, or you've walked away and you're making a sandwich somewhere and I can't see you, that's an issue with regard to your class participation part of your grade.
And Kelly, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, and I appreciate that. But do you know of any discussions about a mandate for cameras turned on? I know there was conversation about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of conversation about it, but there's also a lot of controversy about it as well. So I love the idea of making it part of a participation grade. The other thing, and I can just show you, I know Holly has a virtual background. You can ask the students to turn on a virtual background if they're concerned about what's behind them or seeing things that are behind them. That's something to do as well. I would say whatever your policy is, if you are going to mandate it for your class, make sure you put it in your syllabus so they know that up front. But then there's always going to be concerns about, well, if my camera's not working or I don't have a camera, those kind of things come into it as well. So we're really hesitant to say you can mandate it. But I love, like I said, Ed's idea about the participation grade and including that in there as well. The other
something
thing,
go
ahead, Holly.
Something that a couple of our colleagues have done, so both Mary Engel and Robin Musselman, and I'm sure other people are doing this too, in order to encourage that engagement, because you've got some people who have the cameras on, some but a lot who don't. They have a question of the day, and they do this a couple times, and the students don't know when they're going to ask a question, and the question, the answer or response of whatever the response is needs to go into the chat. So if at 1:10 they say, okay, here's the question, put your answer into chat, and then so there should be a whole bunch of answers in chat at approximately 1:10, and then maybe they ask another one at 1:35. And so that's and as I say, the students don't know when this question is going to be asked, and so that's a way that they have of at least at those moments those students are there and participating. And I'm planning on doing that in the fall.
Go ahead, John. You had something?
I like that. I like that question of the day. That's a good idea.
Kelly, did you have something that you wanted to say? I thought I heard you jump in.
The only other thing I was going to just reinforce is that it is, when you're teaching, it is really hard when you're looking at blank screens. So, one of the things we did, I think it was at development day last year, was they had something where they said, look around your room and find something that's yellow. And, even if you don't have your camera on, turn your camera on, just show us the yellow, whatever it is. And it kind of was almost like an icebreaker, but it got people, where it took the pressure off of them just sitting there looking at you. But that's something else to kind of do throughout the class. Like, okay, we're going to take a little break from the lecture and, find a hat and put it on or something, kind of silly but fun, that may take a little bit of the pressure off.
Brian, my apologies, but I'm going to have to duck out at this point.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, so my next question, and I promise only a couple more, but my question to you guys is, what mode did you pick? Have you picked just one? And why did you choose that one? John, what about you? What did you pick?
If I'm doing demonstration or really just want the attention on me, I use the one that you're using, the single speaker mode.
Yeah.
If there's other people in the room and there might be some discussion, I think the best one is Now that one's not the three screen mode that you have on now. I think
this is the one
is the one that I would normally use, because what it will do, and actually what we see it doing, is you're talking and it's looking at you. It's giving you a whole view of the room, but it's also hearing my voice in the front of the room, and it's focused in on the smart board, which is where the remote students are going to be.
Right.
So if we would have it set up that whoever talks at home, they would take over the screen, then I guess you would just see my picture on that screen, and then it would be more like, who's asking the question. I would stay away from the five, that one. I used that. I thought, man, this one is great. And I used it the first day I tried the unit, and had 3 people tell me to use the word trippy on what their experience was at home with it, that there was just too many versions of me, I think, going on at the same time. The other one that I would shy away from is there's a mode that gives you a view, and then that was the one behind it. And there's the one, there's a single view, and then the camera pans continually around the room. That's
this one.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a way to turn that off as far as the panning goes. So
No,
that one
right.
for me didn't tend to work very well.
And in their defense, I've watched some of the videos. I'm going to go back to the mode so I'm not off the thing.
Seasick.
The camera is also designed for conference rooms and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that constant pan, that might work better in a conference room or in a classroom where you have, say, a discussion going on and you just want the people at home to be able to see on the camera what's going on in the classroom.
Maybe you have a round table.
Right. Holly, what about you? Have you picked one mode? Is there one that you like better?
I tend to go to the 2 camera modes that you have.
This one? Or this one?
I think I probably use either that one or the one before, and I go kind of back and forth on them. I'm probably a little more likely to use the 2 camera rather than the 3.
And by 2 camera, you mean this one, where it's got me on this side. Over here, it's actually showing the front of the room that I'm in. And then up here, you can kind of see the panorama of the room. That's actually a 360-degree view of the room that I'm in. So you can see I'm all alone.
Yeah, so if you go over to the computer.
Yep. So if I go over here, you can still see it's following me, or at least it's trying to follow me. Now I'm on this lower, in my case, my lower right, and I'm also in the middle of the panorama at the top.
Yeah, so I'm more likely to use that mode so that it does see the students who are in the class. You can see the board, and if I'm by the computer or if I'm on the other side of the room, it's following me also.
Do either of you ever, in the middle of class, and I think, John, you alluded to this, but do you ever change modes depending on what's going on in the class?
I have.
Mm-hmm. I'll either change modes on that unit, or I'll just change cameras and use the camera that's on the desktop. If I'm just sitting at the desktop and maybe going over something, I'll use that instead of the presentation unit or the Kandao.
Would you say is it safe to say that you picked the mode that, where am I here? You picked the mode that's working for you based on what is working for you?
Or what I'm doing. Yeah.
Or what you're doing. Yeah.
Sure. If I'm reviewing results of something, and if I know that I'm going to be sharing documents or doing something like that, I'm more comfortable just using the camera that's on the desktop, because when I stop share, it's just going to be on me, kind of like what you see now. But I wouldn't use this if I was going to do a demo on a septic transfer, or anything in the lab, or have any kind of discussion with other people in the room. This wouldn't be a good choice.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And
Okay, so
I tend to walk around.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I tend to walk around a lot, so I want a mode that's going to follow me, and otherwise if I'm using the camera on the computer, I'm on the other side of the room a lot.
Okay, so my next question number 9, has using Kandao changed how you teach your class?
I don't know. I think it's made me more aware of where I am when I'm doing things.
You mean in the room, or
in the room? Because I have to think of if the camera picks me up, where's the camera when if I am walking around. Let's say I'm doing a safety demonstration of everything in the room. You have to go at a certain pace so that as you walk around the room, the camera is panning at the pace that you're walking at, so that you're not talking about something that the students can't see. I haven't had as much experience this summer in particular with having students in the room, which is I think is really the strength of the unit, is the fact that you can have students in the room and it focuses on them and on me and on the people at home. And that's something that I'll just need more experience with. In the spring, it seemed to work pretty well.
Great, thank you. Holly, what about you? Have you noticed anything change?
Absolutely. So I like to do a lot of think, pair, share, or I have students come up to the whiteboards and write things or figure out problems or whatever. And so I've had to come up with ways that I can still do that with the face-to-face people and try to have a comparable experience with the people who are remote. And so that's where you're trying to put them into the breakout rooms and then bringing them back out again. So there's a lot more having to move, do things with the technology. So the people who are in the face-to-face room, I mean, they're just there, they're doing their think, pair, share. But now I have to put let's just say I have 6 people that are remote, and I'm going to pair them up. So I have to make three breakout rooms and make sure that they know the instructions and put them into the breakout rooms, and then still paying attention to what's going on in the face-to-face people, but then bring those people then back out of the. So there's just more of the mechanics that you have to think about. That and then just trying to and I usually try to sit and just think, okay, what if I do this? What are the steps that I have to do? What are the students going to do? I mean, so this is part of that preparation, but I'm thinking a lot more about how are these students that are face-to-face versus these students that are remote going to do this particular activity. So there's a lot more. I mean, yes, there's a lot more planning, but not everything is going to work the same way. And so now you have to anticipate, how is this going to be different, and how can I make it comparable?
Have either of you gotten any feedback from students, say students who are in the classroom, about their thoughts on if anything has changed for them?
Yes. the
Feel free,
students
if
who,
it's positive, please
yeah,
share. If it's not positive, please share that too.
yeah,
I can edit.
students.
No.
I gave. I mean, the face-to-face Kandao class that I did was originally supposed to be remote one day, face-to-face the other day, but because I had a student who needed to be remote the whole time, that's why we went to the Kandao. And so some of the students chose to be remote the whole time. The other students chose to be face-to-face one day. The students who were face to face were more engaged and did better in the class, and so I encouraged the students who were remote. If you can come to campus, because it will make a difference in how you are, how you're learning this material, and they agreed. Now there were some students who did just fine in the remote setting, but those tended to be the students who either had their cameras on or at the very least you knew they were there because they were responding. So yeah, the students recognize, many of the students recognize that they do a better job face-to-face than remote, or at the very least they have to make sure that they're not, playing with their phone, playing Candy Crush off on the side or whatever, making the sandwich. So there's a fair amount of self-responsibility to make sure that they are engaging in the class. And it's a lot easier to engage when you're face-to-face.
Oh, absolutely. For most students, I'll say there are some of those students who are comfortable with that. And Holly, I think it was you that mentioned a bit more of a reliance, at least on your part, on technology. Has that been comfortable for you, I guess, is the best way to put it?
Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable. I mean, I certainly don't know everything. I mean, there are times when somebody says, "Oh, well, I did such and such." Like, "Oh, wow, what a concept!" So I don't know everything, but I'm pretty comfortable with technology. Right now, I've got my monitor. I've got my computer on one side. I've got my iPad on the other side. I've got my phone. So I've got multiple things that I can.
Hopefully you're not playing Candy
Crush. and I'm not playing Candy Crush right now. Yeah.
John, I know you're pretty comfortable with technology. Would you agree with Holly that there is a little more reliance on technology from your part as far as being the teacher in a course like this?
Well, in this whole extended classroom modality, or whatever you're going to call it, I think that this Kandao is just a very, very small part of it. Once you pick the camera mode that you want, and you pick your microphone and speaker, the key to the whole thing is knowing how to use Zoom. You need to know how to share documents, how to use the whiteboard if you want to, how to retrieve things, how to use the breakout rooms. So really, I think the key to the whole thing, more so than the Kandao technology, is knowing how to use Zoom. If you know how to use Zoom, this is just a small part that can make it better, that can bring the people at home together with the people that are in the classroom. But if you're weak at Zoom, your class is going to be a disaster. Or it's maybe not a disaster. It's going to be very frustrating for you and for the students, because you're not going to be able to do what you want to do, and the students are just going to be frustrated that you're inept. So, and you don't know what you're doing. So the fact is, you've got to learn how to use Zoom in order to make the classes work. The remote classes or the extended classroom.
And a shameless plug, we do offer training in Zoom, both basic and advanced. So feel free to contact me to get that done. And I'm happy to do that. But I agree. I think this is a component that's going to make your instruction in Zoom better, or it can. It's just a matter of making sure you're comfortable with it, making sure you're comfortable with Zoom and whatever other technology you're using. So is there anything else that you guys would like to share? Any other thoughts or suggestions or things that you think people should know about the camera, about Zoom, about being in the classroom with it? Anything? Holly, let's start with you.
I have a suggestion. So if this is something that is new for you, one of the things that I did was I went into the classroom before classes started and set things up and Zoomed my daughter. And so she could tell me, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that works. No, that didn't work. That sort of thing. So I would suggest practicing a little bit just so you know how things are going to look, how you're going to pull them up. And it helps to have somebody else on that other end to tell you, yes, I can see that. No, that doesn't work.
Yep.
And
John, what about you?
We're happy to be there on that other end if any faculty need us to do that.
You know, if you want to go in and try out the camera, or if you want to just see it or see how it works, you know, you can always contact me or Kelly, and we'll get you into a room with a camera, and you can go basically you can go play. And if you want me, you know, or somebody to be on the other end to do like Holly said, and you know, let you know what's working, what's not, you know, happy to do that. Also during convocation, I don't have the dates in front of me, but during convocation in August, we're going to be setting up the camera in a room and inviting anybody who wants to see it to come in and just kind of walk through, ask any questions, see how it works, sort of in a lab experience or a technology lab experience. So look for information about that during the convocation week. I believe it's going to be on Wednesday, but look for information in the convocation packet when you get it. John, any final thoughts that you might have?
No, I just think that it is essential to try this before you have your first class. Mm-hmm. You know, try Zoom and try these camera, because if you know what your camera setting you want to use and you know which speakers you want to use, that's most of the hurdle right there. And you'd want to do that ahead of time and get a little bit of experience with it. And that's great if your offices are offering to be the students or to be the outside people looking in, because that's important. Like Holly said, that I think I know what's going on, but so many times you hear on Zoom, can you see whatever it is you're trying to show? Can you see this Excel sheet? Can you see this other part? And after a while, you should just know what the students see. And I think one way around that I've gotten is, instead of saying, do you see, I'll just reshare the same document, because I don't want to keep asking the crowd what they can see. You know, we're supposed to be the experts or the people who know how to use the technology. And I think you have to act appropriately. And if you're continually asking the crowd what they can see, I think that pulls away from the fact of you actually knowing what's going on. So I would encourage practicing.
I want to add in just one little thing there that, as John was talking, it reminded me. Occasionally, when I would put either the Smart Notebook or PowerPoint on the smart board, the students that were at home would say it's blurry. And what I had to do then was to unshare and reshare in order for it to hopefully not be blurry. But for some reason, occasionally it would be blurry for them, and by simply unsharing and resharing, that fixed the problem.
That so.
Yeah, it could be a network connecting issue, and just resharing maybe fixed it. But that's a great tip for anyone else to know as well.
The last thing that I wanted to say was that through feedback from other faculty members, they asked for I guess for lack of a better term, an instruction guide in each room where a Kandao camera is going to be located. And I'm still putting it together. This is sort of a rough draft of what it's going to look like that's up on the screen. But as far as the camera goes, it's simple. It's 3 easy steps, and that's only 3 steps if it's not already plugged in and ready to go. If it's in the room already, if it's plugged in, if it's connected to the computer already, all you have to do is come in, turn the camera on, and basically then teach. It talks about what the buttons are, and there's 4 buttons. And then over on the other side, it talks about using the camera in Zoom, just like John was saying. So easily before fall, and hopefully within the next week or so, this is going to be done, and it should be in the rooms with everything. And on there, it's going to have information about who to call if there's a question or if there's a problem during your class or whatever. So there's that's coming down the line. Look for that. If it's not in the room, let me know and I'll get you one. I'll also be sharing it with the faculty as well. So any other final thoughts, comments, anything that you want to add? We'll start with you, Kelly. Anything that you wanted to finish up with?
I think the only other thing I wanted to mention that's come up before is, when there's testing and you have 2 different class modalities, is just to remember that they are different modalities that, you wouldn't expect to have the same type of experience for your students. So, and that's something, to make sure, again, that you're thinking of ahead of time and, having in your syllabus or in the notes when a class is put out for students to choose. But we do have Respondus Lockdown Browser and Monitor, so you can use that with your remote students. And then you can do a regular exam in class, or you can have all of the students, if they have access to a computer, do a Respondus exam. So they're all doing it the same way. And that's using Canvas. So, and just let us know if you have questions about that or need training on that.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We're here. We're happy to try to help you when we can with your testing and getting that set up. So feel free to give us a call and we'll do what we can. John, what about you? Any final thoughts, comments, ideas?
No.
Looking forward to the fall?
Always. Always. It's almost here.
That's true. It is only about a month away. Mm-hmm. Holly, anything?
No, I actually will do just a little bit of follow up on the testing. I, with the class that was face to face and remote, I did the tests online. It was all problem solving, open note kind of thing, unlimited time, and so that they were all doing the same modality. I'm trying to figure out for the fall if I'm going to do that again. So I might actually try the Respondus, but I think that having the same experience for the students, whether they're remote or face to face, is important, so that they don't feel like one group is at a disadvantage over the other.
Yeah, and I would say too, if anyone's trying to figure that out and needs help, our department can help you figure that out. I know there are issues with the testing center that they can't take a full class at one time. So, that's been a concern. So please reach out to us and we'll see what we can do to help figure those things out.
Yep. Guys, I want to thank you all for being here. I appreciate your time, and I know we went a little bit longer than I expected, but thank you guys for being as awesome as you are. Thank you for sharing your insight. Thank you for making me smart enough to have asked you to come here and do this for us. And again, good luck through, if you're teaching in the summer, John, I think you said you were. Good luck in the fall. If you need me, let me know. And, you know, like I said, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
You're welcome.
Have a good day. And like I said, if anybody needs anything as far as the Kandao, you want to come in and test it out, you want to go and just take it for a spin, you know, get in touch with me, and we'll be able to put you in a room, even if it's this one, where you can just go and you can go and do that. So thank you again, and I look forward to all of the questions. I say that now, but I do look forward to all of the questions, and have a great rest of the summer. I'll see you guys in the fall. Thank you.